Hello everyone, Caroline here. Today I'm going to share the cards that I created with the Love from Lizi card kit for the month of December. For card 1, I decided to make it a large square card. I used one of the dies from my stash, and I used that pattern paper that has this geometric pink pattern, and I actually gave it a frame with a brush and Distress Oxide ink. I'm adding, for some sparkles, a little of the Dilution Shimmer ink in white, and also from the Nouveau Shimmer sprays, Apfel Spritzer, a few splashes. While that's drying, I'm going to stamp out the flowers that came with the stamp set. And I'm actually ink them up with two types of ink, with green archival ink, I think that's the Fern, and then with the archival ink Vintage Photo. I stamp this on watercolor paper. I thought to watercolor this out, trying these aqua markers from Spectrum, and I choose 3 colors: a light pink, a little darker pink, and a green. And that green matches perfect with the ink I used for the stamping. I lay down the darker ink outside of or like a shadow, and then the lighter ink to the end of the outside the leaves. And with a brush and water, I'm just mixing this together, trying to get darker towards the inside of the leaves. And then I'm adding literally another layer of that darker pink. And after that, I decided to get a little darker. I didn't have a darker color marker, so I used my regular watercolors and I mixed myself a darker pink to give the shadows, give it more shadowing. After I dried the flowers, I cut them up, and then I added some Distress microglaze, and that will give the paper a little sheen. Then I fussy cut all these flowers, and I also fussy cut those 2 birds. This came from the sticker sheet, and then I die cut out the leaves from a die from a previous Spellbinders kit. After my background dried, I added that to my card, and I also added a vellum circle, which will help me to glue on the leaves in a circle. And for my leaves, I leave the end of the leaves, I don't glue them on. I want them to be able to stick off the paper. I only put the glue really on the inside, and then I stick on top of each other, using a little pick to get them really in the circle arranged. Now in this kit came those buttons, and at first I wasn't sure what to do with them, but then I was like, okay, I just make just flowers. So I added a little glue stick or glue dot to the back, and added a few leaves, and then added them with another glue dot to the wreath that I created. And here I'm arranging the birds, and I also picked up one of the die cuts to fill out with my sentiment for the fill out the circle or the inside of the wreath. And then I'm just starting to arrange my flowers how I want them and glue everything down with foam, tape, squares, liquid glue, and glue dots. And here's this one of the buttons which I glued on with the glue dot. And that sticks better. Paper sticks better on paper than the plastic on paper. Just like a double glue there. Now I decided I wanted to add the edge want to add an extra something to the edge of the card. So I literally cut away the back side of the card and added with my finger rose gold glaze from Vicky Booten. And then I started to embellish the card with glossy accent. I used a couple of different colors of Nuvo drops. And for the flower, inside the flowers, I used a little tool, a flower tool, to so I didn't put the Nuvo drops directly on it. I put it on the side and then tipped it on with that tool. And here you can see the finished card. Okay, the second card. For my second card, I wanted to create a watercolor background. I used pixie powders and I also used 3 different watercolor brushes, and I have this beautiful heart die from Altenö which I cut out, and I want to be the focus point of this card. Now I wetted my paper in heart shape and started to drop in the powders. And I wanted this to be more a muted color arrangement. So I used like a gold, a bronze, and then a greenish color. And then I'm just adding water. I just grabbed a paper towel here. You can see in a moment how I'm adding the water, and then I'm taking the water away to end, so I have my first layer. Here you go. Just taking away that water and the extra pigment. And then I'm dripping and moving the pigment around with my brush, and my intention is to make this heart almost like fly in, so I want to give it some movement. So you will see in a moment I will add some colors on the side to this heart. And you can see me taking the water away. It was too much water. And here you can see me how I'm trying to give this a shape, some movement by adding some pigment to the side. Now I'm adding more red and some splatters. And I'm adding in more pigment powders. And the nice thing about the pixie powders, it has this beautiful shiny sparkle. So even if you use this with other watercolors, it will still have this sparkle in it. Here you can see me taking away more water. Really try to keep the heart shape there, but I also want to add some extra color around it. Now I'm taking my regular watercolors because the pigment of the pink was a little bit not deep enough, so I just added some regular watercolor pigment. And taking away the water, and then I dry this with my heating tool. And then the edge, I'm just using the mahogany distress ink and just go with a little square around the edge. Now I'm adding the dye, and since it's so hard to glue this on with a regular liquid glue, I'm just use this glue foam square and to glue it onto that. Now for my sentiment, I use one of Lizi's sentiment from the set, from the stamp set. I'm adding some mahogany distress ink around it, and then I'm adding like a golden twine around the card. And then I'm adding the little tag, which has the sentiment with all my heart. And I'm also adding the little key, one of the little keys that came with the kit. And then I'm attaching this also with glue dots, so it doesn't move too much. The tag and the key, so it sits in place and doesn't move around. There. And then for embellishment, I'm using the sequins mix that came with the kit, and just adding them on the top left and the bottom right, so it really gives this impression of the heart moved into, like gives it some movement. And that's the finished card. Oh, for card 3, I'm using those wooden buttons, and I decided to color them with my Nouveau Shimmer sprays. I started out with the pink one, which is the Blush Burst, and just spray it a couple of times, and then transfer this to paper so it can dry, and that needs some time to dry. I mean, depending on where you live, for me it took almost a day until they were really completely dry. You just have to let them air dry. And then I'm picking up the leftover spray with a piece of mixed media paper, and I thought I'm gonna create another background with the leftover so it's not wasted. And that's the green. The green is the apple spritzer, and the blue actually was the marine mist. Now here I'm using the same card and add the green. Now the last color is the cocoa powder. It's like a nice brown, and again I'm picking up the leftover with that mixed media paper. So I thought those colors go perfectly with the colors of the kit. Now I'm starting assembling my card. I cut out an oval shape with one of my Spellbinders die, and have 2 leftover leaves from my first card. I add some die cuts. I'm adding one of the pen and paper and just a white card envelope. I also use 2 stickers, but I removed the stickiness. I actually just make them regular die cut so I can lift them, and with a powder tool. And then I'm stamping out a sentiment that is coming from a Concord 9 stamp set, and I'm adding some green to the outside of this panel, and then I'm adding my oval, and I also cut up not cut up, but I'm cutting out the flowers. I'm removing this white frame. I'm adding one of the cut up pieces with the sentiment rest up, and then assembling like a little flower bouquet on top of it, so it looks like a vase. And I'm adding this with liquid glue and dimensional tape, like foam tape. And I'm just assembling the bouquet, like I think it looks good. And I'm also adding one of the burlap flowers that came with the kit, and a little butterfly. And for this burlap flower, I removed that foam tape and used a glue dot. That worked better for me in this case. Now here are my buttons that I'm adding, and it's just the perfect color for this card. I mean, I'm just amazed how beautiful those buttons look. So that's there, and I'm adding final touch, some stickers in diamond and some glossy accent. And here's the finished card. Okay, card 4. Okay, for this card I decided to go with it and use the background that came out with the when I colored the buttons. I used a craft card for my stash. I added some pattern paper, and then I'm adding the peel-offs that came with the kit around this panel, the mixed media panel. Give it a frame, and I also decided to pop this up from the card and added some square of black fun foam and added that on top of the card. Then I added one of the big butterfly that came with the die cuts, and from the sticker sheet, the Be Kind sentiment. And then I decided, here we go, my buttons. Decided to use different colors, the green, the blue, and I always put them opposite. So whereas like a green background, I use a different color, not the same color, to give it some contrast. And then I'm adding glossy accent to the butterfly, to the outside and the inside, and I used sentiment from the same stem set that I used earlier from Concord and 9th, and that's the set, I think it's the set Be Kind or Kindness. And I'm adding some Nouveau drops and stickles, and that's the finished card. Okay, card 5. Okay, for card 5, I decided to do one of my favorite techniques that I really like. I ink blended with distress and dye stress ink a background, and I have this pretty yellow, it calls Bumblebee from dye stress, and I'm adding that, and then I'm adding the permission, ripe permission from Distress ink. This is nice orange, and I'm blending it until I have like this kind of gradient, orange to yellow, and then I'm adding this forest green color on the sides. Now I let that dry for a minute, and then I'm using one of the stamps, and I'm just adding water to the stamp and stamping with water. And I love the effect that this gives. It has this ghosting effect. And you just have to make sure you take off that extra water. And I'm adding this like a pattern on that whole background. Yeah, and then I'm also adding some random droplets. And just for extra, still some more drops of water to give this watercolor effect. Then I'm adding some distress paint in picket fence in white, and also frame this with this forest green color, like distressing. Then I cut out again flowers. I cut away the white frame and also from the bird, and I also rough the edges up a little bit with my little tool there. And then I'm adding one of the pattern papers, and I use the yellow card here, and add my background. And I cut out I think 3 of the sunshine, Hello Sunshine die, and stack them on top of each other. And then I'm arranging my flowers and the bird, and add this with foam tape and liquid glue to my background. You can see me how I try to figure out my arrangement, what looks best. And then I'm using one of the stickers and from the sticker sheets, and add this in addition to the Hello Sunshine. And I'm just finish this off with a few sequins, and of course my glossy accent and some Nuvo drops, I think, or stickles. Yeah, Nuvo drops, with white Nuvo drops. And here's the finished card. Okay, I created another card because I really loved this pattern paper, and I was like, I need to do a card with this paper. It's so beautiful. So I decided to picked out a die from my stash, which has the little birds flying, and I just glued this beautiful pattern paper to a cardboard, to a card base, and added some dilution shimmer. I wanted to create almost like a few snowflakes. And then I'm adding a sentiment from a stamp set that I have that was from Crafter's Companion. And I thought I really like this sentiment, and I thought it goes perfectly with this card. So when this is dry, I am adding this to my card. And I cut out the sentiment with a die from Sizzix. And I'm actually adding the die cut that I where I cut out the birds and use it as a guide how to place my birds, and have to fiddle them into the right spot. So it's a little bit like a puzzle. And then when it's done, I can just lift this off, and then I'm adding the other two birds, and I'm adding a little bit of glue to my sentiment, to the vellum, but I'm also attaching two the flowers from the sticker sheet to hold my vellum in place. Then I'm adding more stickles and glossy accents. And I'm adding this to the flowers to give them a little bit more dimension. This is a very flat card for me. Usually I'm doing a lot of dimension, but I really liked how this turned out. Here is the finished card. And here are again all the cards. First one. And here's the second one. Well, I hope you liked the cards, and I hope you got inspired and dive into your card kit or into your stash and get crafting some beautiful cards. I will leave you here, and I wish you a wonderful Sunday, and I hope I see you in my next video. Until then, bye.